Hi, everybody. I hope we've all had a really great week. I know the school year is almost through. So if you have any brain cells left, good for you. I just wanted to introduce myself. I've been a professional singer my entire adult life. And I'm very passionate about helping mentor young singers like yourselves find the right programs. But really, more importantly, the first step here is after high school is your college audition. I'm just wondering if anybody is actually auditioning for grad school right now, or are we mostly undergrads in the chat? And you're welcome to put that in the chat, undergrad, grad, just so I know who I'm talking to. I don't want to make any assumptions. Megan Grady is here too. She's from our school. She is the director of recruitment at our school, and she's fantastic. And she'll help me with the chat if anybody has any questions as I go. She can help field all of that. And if anybody has questions as I go, and you need direction to a certain website, a certain link, she will put that in the chat for you as well. So Megan is an awesome resource. I'm so glad to do this class with Megan. Thanks, Megan. So thank you. Undergrad, great. So the first phase of your professional careers as singers is college. Obviously, you want to get into a great school. That's going to help you become a more well-rounded musician. It's probably a little bit humbling for you at this stage because many of you are probably the big fish in your small pond. And now you're at the stage where you may be entering a slightly larger pond with equally talented big fish from other small ponds. So it can be a little daunting. So I just want to put you at ease. Your college audition, you are there to present yourself as you are now. We panelists, we adjudicators, your voice faculty, we're not expecting to see a finished product. But we have a very difficult job because we're here to assess potential in the field. And admittedly, sometimes we argue over like where that potential is because singing is largely a subjective art form. Most music is subjective. So I just want to go through the main tenets of what we're looking for at your audition, the main things we're looking for. Essentially, basic technical prowess. That might include language ability, that may include range, that may include your ability to do scales easily, staccatos, great legato, any kind of technical prowess that you want to put on display. We would love to hear that. Secondly, we're looking for vocal quality. Is your voice dark? Is it light? Is it bright? Is it lofty? Is it classically leaning? Maybe is it MT? Do you have versatility there? What is the vocal quality? Is it interesting? Is it warm and fuzzy? Like what is it that you're presenting? Also, we're looking for interpretation. What are you bringing to the table interpretation wise? Do you connect with the text that you're singing? Are you emotive while you're singing? Or are you more just the stand and sing kind of person? So these things, they don't have to be perfect, but we're looking for these little elements. I might also argue we're looking for good intonation. I'm assuming that if you can sing, you can keep excellent pitch. We understand that at your audition, you may be a little nervous and maybe push a little sharp or go a little flat. Those are negligible mistakes, and we've all made them. I've made them go a little sharp. You're like, I was a little excited there. But technically speaking, are you able to maintain pitch? Can you find where the dough is all the time? Rhythm, also basic tenet of musicianship. How is your rhythm? Are you employing rubato well? Or are you just really not paying attention to the rhythms that are written on the page? You know, we as your panelists, we tend to know the music you're singing pretty well, especially if they're from the standard canon. So if you decide to take some liberties with the rhythm and it's definitely on purpose, we can probably tell. But if the rhythms are a little bit sloppy and we think maybe it's not quite on purpose, we can also tell that too. So be careful you're accurate with your rhythms, your intonation. And we're always looking for that undefinable musicianship thing. Do you take what's on the page and do you elevate it beyond what is in the printed score? Can you use dynamics in an expressive way? Do you have that woo factor? You walk in the room and we just are immediately, drawn to you. What is it in musicianship that might set you apart from other candidates? And then there's overall impression. So with all of these basic tenets that we're looking for, there's the overall impression that we're looking for. This is usually where I write both the good and the bad things that I've observed. And honestly, I imagine, could I work with this student? What is my imagined idea of how that relationship may go? Or do I really see a student and I think, oh, that's my colleague student. My colleague would work great with that energy. And we have these conversations when it comes to the admissions process. Um, there is a relationship that we're trying to build here. And as undergrads, you are essentially signing a contract to work with your teacher for 4 years. And that's a serious commitment. So you want to make sure that you as the student are going to be working in the right school with the right teacher. And I, as the teacher, need to make sure that I have the same kind of chemistry with you so we can enter in this relationship together. So I just wanted to go through a couple little things about preparing your college audition. How do you prepare? I'm going to say this right off the bat. Check your application deadlines very carefully. Megan is laughing because she knows what I'm talking about. I cannot emphasize to you enough how important it is to submit your stuff early if you can, because in the age of digital applications, you may miss something. You may forget to upload your essay. You may forget to upload your SAT scores. There may be a myriad of things that you just forget to do, or you think you've submitted them, but you didn't click the submit button. So trying to do this early really, really helps you in the end. And frankly speaking, for us teachers, if we can spread apart listening to your applications over a longer amount of time, it's much, much easier on our ears and our brains versus getting an influx of hundreds of people all on December 1st. And then we're looking at a mountain of singers that we have to listen to, and that can be really daunting for us. So if you get your stuff together early and you submit it early, then I can listen to you with fresh ears and we're all on the same page there. Um, it's a little controversial to say that, but it's true. If you think about how you all feel in your own school semesters right before Thanksgiving, you know you're looking forward to Thanksgiving, not just for the turkey, but for a little time off from school. Am I right? Of course. So we feel that way too. So we don't want to be listening to auditions during Thanksgiving time, but we do, because that's when we have some time off. So whatever you can do to make this process easier on yourself, look at these deadlines and try to get things done a little bit early. Also read the rules and protocols for your auditions very carefully, specifically video versus audio submissions. Most schools now are asking for video. And the reason we do is because we want to not only assess the sound that we're hearing, but the instrument that the sound is coming from. We're looking at your posture, we're looking at your artistic woo as you perform. And we also want to make sure that the sound that is coming out of you and not out of somebody else. So be careful about your video submissions. Take into account neutral colors look best on dark backgrounds. Solid colors look best on busy backgrounds. Megan has a blurred background, which is also good because you can really focus on her, as you can see. Be careful of the lighting in your videos. If you have stray hairs, make sure they are pulled up out of your face. And it's also not a bad idea to wear the same outfit for your live audition, if and when that happens, as you do for your video submission. Why do we suggest this? Because we hear many, many, many of you, and that initial impression is usually audio related. It's like, does this person get past the next round, your pre-screening? But having the visual cue later to go with our audio memory can be really helpful for us. There are so many of you, and if I can wed the look of you to the sound that I remember, that just helps me more. It helps me remember you in the process more. So if you can find the perfect audition outfit for yourself, I do love this because I can throw this in a bag, it crumples up, doesn't get wrinkled. I just take it out, fling it, and it's like ready to go. It's a dress. I'm not going to show the whole thing because I'm sitting down, but I wore this as an example of what you might want to wear to your college audition if you're a young soprano or a young mezzo soprano. Think about colors versus black versus white, because the color too makes the memory pop a little bit more. So check that out. Next thing you want to do in the whole application process is repertoire requirements. You'll probably notice that most schools like to see at least 3 selections. Um, Usually for classical programs, they're going to ask for something in Italian, something in English, and then something else. Sometimes they ask for more than 3, but generally I see most schools are asking for 3 things. So try to remember some key factors when you're deciding your repertoire. Oh, good. Megan just posted repertoire requirements as an example in the chat. If you want to go click on that, it'll take you to our repertoire requirements. Consider tempo. So many of you may have private teachers. Some of you may not have private teachers, but your repertoire is primarily assigned by your high school choir teacher, for example. That's totally fine. Make sure that you have a very frank conversation with that person in that case to consider tempo differences in your pieces. Try not to offer 3 things in the same tempo. It may be a little boring for you to sing everything that's kind of slow. It may be a little boring for us. Aim for like a slow tempo to show sustainment, and then maybe something that has a contrasting tempo to show either personality or range or some skill set. Like your voice moves really fast. You can do scales really easily. That can be really helpful for us. Think about key signature. Whenever possible, pick repertoire in varying keys. Why? Well, because we want to hear your range, but we also want to hear where the optimum tessitura for you may be. And that doesn't mean the range of the piece. That means where does your voice like to sit? So you may have low C to high C, for example, but if your voice really wants to live from like F to C, maybe you want to pick something in the key of F and the key of G and the key of C, something that hangs out up there so you can really show off that skill set. Where does your voice really want to live? If you're in between voice types, however, that is not a deal breaker. So rest assured, many lower voiced people, when they go through puberty, their voices crack, it drops. And sometimes over the course of the next 3 years, 4 years of undergrad, it continues to drop. We are aware of that. There are mezzos that come in and discover, wait, I'm not really a mezzo, I'm a soprano who just has a great chest voice. We can work with that. If you are a between voice type of singer, try to find the tessitura and key of songs versus arias for yourself, because songs you can transpose to any key you need, whereas arias you really can't. They're kind of set. That is why songs are so great. Personally speaking, I don't care what key you transpose a song into, as long as it's comfortable for you. And there's plenty of websites that you can go to do that. Sheet Music Plus, you can sometimes transpose keys, or you can get yourself into a Finale program on your computer, or you can pay a friend who's really good at doing that and they can transpose it for you. We don't care what key you sing your songs in, as long as it's comfortable for you and you are happy singing it. Then we have the musical era thing. This is probably the trickiest, and I know you're all young, but whenever possible, try to adhere to the performance style of the pieces you're presenting. So what do I mean by this? If you're singing Handel in Italian and another Handel in English, that's still 2 pieces by Handel. So that doesn't show us a lot of variety, even though it does show us 2 different languages. If your first selection is Handel, and that's from the Baroque period, maybe you want to sing something from the Romantic period, maybe an art song by a Fauré, for example, something in French, or maybe you want to sing something from the contemporary period. Maybe if you have an affinity for African-American spirituals, you want to do a great arrangement of Margaret Bonds. That would be great. with a handle. So you see what I mean? The more variety you can show us in your versatility, the better it is for you and the better it is for us. And then you can enjoy your audition way more because it gives you a chance to show off a little bit, like, look how much I can do in 3 pieces versus all of my pieces are the same tempo, same key, same period of time. So at this point, I do want to take a second and ask if anybody has any questions about anything I've talked about so far. This is just like the audition day, how you're preparing for that day. And I'll just wait in the chat, or you're welcome to like just jump in or take your video off, and I'm happy to field any questions about that. Because the next top, yes,
hand raise feature too. I like
hand
that.
raise feature. If people are shy and you don't want to do that and you'd rather I just go on, you can put in the chat, just keep going, and I'll just keep going.
Or a thumbs up can be our signal too.
Yeah. Anybody have any thoughts about any of that? Just thumbs up, keep going. You got it.
Let's do it.
Okay, great. So let's imagine that we've all done all the right things. We've checked our audition dates. We have all the requisite repertoire we need. We have a killer audition ensemble. Those of you who wear slacks to auditions, just make sure that the right length and they're pressed, please. It just looks a lot neater than crumpled slacks. If you are going to wear something that has a low neckline, just make sure it's modest. You know, you want the attention to be on you, not on any costume malfunctions that may happen. You know, take that out of the equation for us. So when you walk in, I see you, and I'm not worried about anything else except what you're going to sound like. So here we are at the audition. You've made it past that round. We're at the audition now. Following instructions can include being assigned a practice room. I always advocate trying to arrive at your audition at least 15 minutes early, at least, if not a half hour, if not an hour. The old adage, if you're on time, you're late, really does apply to auditions. If you're early, it helps you stay focused, and then you get to your audition in a calm way. At CMU, we audition singers in a certain room, and it's not a bad idea to ask, what's the room like? That is a perfectly reasonable thing that you could ask people like Megan if there's a welcome table. Where do I put my personal belongings if you're not there with your parents? There's usually a welcome table at all of these audition sites, and they can answer all of those mundane questions, and there's no question too mundane. They've heard it all. Where do I go? Who's in the room? Where do I put these things? What is the procedure? If you can mentally prepare for your audition before you in the room, that makes it so much easier. Your accompanist. If you are assigned a faculty accompanist, I'm going to tell you a secret. You can assume that that faculty pianist knows how your repertoire is going to go. So you can take that out of the equation. Don't be nervous about being assigned a pianist that you don't know if they are actually a faculty member. At CMU, faculty members alone play all of your auditions, and they are very well acquainted with all of your repertoire. So that's one more thing you don't have to worry about. We actually discourage singers from bringing their own pianists to the audition, because we find that A, that's an expense that you don't need to incur, and B, our faculty are fabulous. So you can trust them. They usually have a list of the repertoire you're singing ahead of time. And if it's very difficult repertoire, chances are they'll ask, what is this? Or can I get a copy of this music? Or they'll take it upon themselves to get the copy themselves. But what you can do for your pianist is to mark anything in your score that you deem necessary. If there's a cut that you're making, make sure you do that in a different colored pencil. If you choose to lay your music out so there's no page turns, that's a great idea too. The one thing I would say is that unlike musical theater, classical pianists tend to not like their music in plastic sheets, plastic sheeting. That really is kind of a strictly musical theater thing. And the reason for that is the overhead glare of the lights can sometimes blind you to the actual notes on the page. So whenever possible, make sure that your music for classical auditions, and this is across the board, is just neat paper, not in plastic sheets. At your audition, you get to pick the first selection. You pick the thing that you know you could roll out of bed and sing, even if you're sick, even if you're running late. You pick the thing that you know you could sing anything after. We may, as a panelist, ask to hear a second piece, possibly a third piece, or portion of a second and or third piece, depending on how long the audition is. And don't try to read into that. Just because we want to hear a piece, a portion of a piece, it doesn't mean we don't like you. It just may mean we're running out of time and I want to hear as much of you as possible. So if you have a multi-strophic piece, like let's say Schubert's Ständchen, for example, that piece can be long. So maybe we might say, hey, can you start with the second verse and go to the end? It's not because we don't love that piece. I personally love that piece. But if you don't start with it and we're running late and there's another faculty member who wants to hear a portion of the third piece, chances are we won't hear all three, but we might hear portions of things. Notwithstanding, we may also ask for a sight reading. Is anybody here terrified of sight reading? I want to make sure that you're not scared of it. I'll tell you as a panelist what sight reading tells us. This is the skinny on sight reading. Yes, sight reading is important, but really for us, sight reading is another piece of information that we may not get just from how you sing. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, we asked a student, thank you, Isaac, don't be nervous on sight reading. If we asked a student to sing, hey, would you mind sight reading for us? And the girl said, oh, no, I can't sight read. And we said, oh, no, let's just, we'll try. And she said, no, I don't read music. And we all went, oh, that's a piece of information I'm glad to know. Turns out her teacher taught her all of the music by ear, by playing the piano, by singing it, and she never asked her to learn music. That was an important piece of information for me to know. Another thing that I'm looking for personally, if I give you a piece to sight read, we'll give you a minute to look at it. You can look at it and then you sight read. If you make a mistake on the way, that's fine. You're nervous. We all make mistakes. I will frequently ask the student, can you find where do is? Where is do? And if you can find where that tonic is after making all those mistakes, that tells me you have a great ear. You may be nervous, but you have a good ear. And that's another piece of information that I'm looking for. Of course, if you come into a sight reading, and I see this question there, I will answer that in a second. If you go into a sight reading and you are a jazzer, like I had a student who's now at the Manhattan School of Music, getting his master's in contemporary music. When I said, hey, can you sight read something? He said, sure, what tempo? I'm like, okay. So that was another piece of information. And then he started snapping and he sang the sight reading and he swung it. And I thought, okay, that's my student right there. I love jazz. That's great. I love classical, but that guy, that's my student. And we had a great relationship for 4 years. So yes, will musical theater have a sight reading portion or just for classical? That depends. That depends. Some schools do ask for it and some do not. I don't know what CMU does in that case. Megan, do you? No.
I don't know because I know that they do unifieds and that's about all I know for our School of Drama.
And also, I think with musical theater too, the rounds are a little bit different. Some schools, they ask you to sing and then they ask you to wait around and do another round of something and another round of something. So those layers sometimes include sight reading and sometimes they don't. My advice to you would be to contact whatever Megan Grady is at those particular schools and just ask, can my student, can my daughter, can my son be expected to sight read at the audition? And they'll tell you. It's not going to be a surprise. They'll usually just tell you. I hope that answers your question, Quinn. Thanks. When you're on campus, let's assume that next year we're all live and on campus and it's going to be beautiful. When you get to campus and you are at these welcome booths, welcome areas, I would just like to kindly remind you that we know as panelists and adjudicators what is going on in the hallway. So sometimes we get reports of students who are just so great. They're asking all these questions and they're making friends with people and they're so nice. Sometimes we get reports, there's a student, oh, they were so nervous, it was so sweet. And sometimes, and this is very rare, sometimes we get a report of perhaps an energy that is incongruous with what we're looking for. And that can happen due to a number of factors. Maybe your plane arrived late and you're very scattered. Um, or maybe you came to campus too early and you made a mistake and maybe we're just grouchy. So just be aware though that we do talk. The lines of communication are open always. And we want as a faculty to have a supportive class, a talented class of people, and we're trying to pick people for our program that we know that will love it here, that they'll really get a lot out of our school. So we're looking for that good personality as well. Introverts are welcome at our school as well as extroverts. So just be mindful of behaviors whenever school you go to, because, and this is me being very frank with you all, we all discuss everybody that we hear. And usually it's nothing but good things. Occasionally we get a little, oh, I don't know about that. So I'm sure you're all wonderful kids. So just keep being wonderful. All right, you're on campus. Big question. Can you contact a teacher for a lesson? The answer is yes. Yes, you can. Some students email teachers and ask for trial lessons or sample lessons. For me, I just say, just ask for a lesson. It doesn't have to be a sample. A sample makes me feel like I'm giving you an hors d'oeuvre of vocal technique. And I'm like, well, I do a little more than that. And a trial makes it seem like I've done something wrong and you're putting me on trial. So calling it a trial or a sample makes it seem a little bit too much. Just if you want to ask a teacher for a lesson, say, hey, I'm coming to campus. Can I meet you for a lesson? And it's understood what that means. Some schools have different protocols about how long that lesson might be. And if there's money to be exchanged at the end of that lesson, you should find that all out up front. So it's not a surprise when you get there. So CMU has recently changed what they are doing, and sample lessons are gratis. So you just have to call other professors and find out, because some part-time professors who are paid hourly at other schools, they have the right to collect money for that hour of their time. Full-time faculty tend to do lessons under the umbrella of this is your job. So they would not collect money for their time. So find out in advance. Yes, Megan, I recommend 2 to 3 weeks before an audition. Absolutely. Because if you wait until the day before you get to campus, chances are I've already booked up my time with prospective students. So 2, 3 weeks in advance, great. Also, taking lessons outside of the audition zone is also great for me. It, I have much more free time on weekends that I'm not actually listening to auditions to give lessons to wonderful people like yourselves. So lessons at CMU for prospective students are only 30 minutes long. Usually there's a little bit of a Q&A. I like to invite parents into my lesson, but for some teachers, they don't want parents in the lessons. So again, find all that stuff out beforehand. And then you can also ask to observe a lesson. Sometimes teachers say no, sometimes they say yes. I have an open door policy myself, and all of my students know that. As long as I know in advance, again, 2 to 3 weeks in advance, I can talk to my students ahead of time and say, hey, would you mind being observed in your lesson today? And usually the students like, sure, I don't care. But occasionally they're like, no, my recital's coming up. I really want just this. And I say, fine. So what you should be evaluating when you take these lessons is a lot. So let's go through it a little bit. If you're working with a teacher for the first time and they're introducing new vocalises, ask, why am I doing this? If it's a vocalese you don't know, do you know the reason why you're doing this exercise? Why am I doing this? What does this help with? Usually the teacher will tell you, let's do some scales. Let's get your upper range moving. Okay, clearly that's what this exercise is for. But if they have you do some weird like something exercise with your tongue, like, you can ask questions, and please do. It's your right to ask questions. It's your time too. Assess for yourself, how does the teacher work? This is key when it comes to thinking about entering into the relationship with the teacher. Is the teacher usually, is she primarily an image oriented type of teacher? Is the teacher really into like voice science and anatomy and pedagogy? Are they really into like physicality and like yoga and Alexander technique? In other words, what is the teacher's style and method of teaching? And does that gel with you? You may hear fantastic things about Professor X. Oh my God, they're so great. Their students go blah, 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 blah. And you're like, I want to get in that person's studio. And then you get there and you think to yourself, I don't like this. This isn't gel with me. Um, but it works for them, but not for me. That's something you should listen to. Listen to your instincts on that, because that instinct can follow you for the next 4 years. And you want to make sure that you're in the relationship that you need to be in. In other words, how many of you in here are really like image oriented people? Like, you don't have to, this could be a, a rhetorical question, but think to yourself, am I image oriented? Do I like to imagine the tone is floating from the top of my head out? Am I like paint the ceiling kind of a singer? Do I imagine things? Would you work well if you're an image oriented person with someone who likes to talk very specifically about anatomy, for example, like naming all the muscles in your larynx, like naming all the muscles in your back? Would that be helpful to you? Or if you're that kind of person, if you like to over intellectualize things, if you like to know the anatomy, if you like to know what's going on in there, I like pedagogy. If you work with somebody that was image oriented, would that drive you crazy? It might. It absolutely might. And that's why when you go to schools, you have the right as the prospective student to ask for lessons with multiple people. That is your right. And at our school, our teachers know this. I work with people and I have a great relationship with that person in that lesson. And then I find out they've requested to work with my colleague down the hall. Okay, fine. I'm not bitter about it. It didn't work for you. That's fine. But that same thing will happen to me. Someone works with a colleague down the hall. They decide they don't want to work with them. They come to me and we have a great time. So there's plenty of information to go around. And you as the student have the right to ask for as many lessons with as many people as you want. That's your right. And if teachers have an issue with that, you can examine that too. So think about too, asking questions of your teacher. What are some of your past and present students doing right now? That's a fair question. Talk to their students on campus and find out like what the vibe is, because the teacher, obviously, if they like you, they want you to be in their studio. That's an easy job for us. If I find a student that's a great singer and good personality, yes, I want to work with you. Absolutely. But don't take my word for it. Talk to some of my students and see how they feel. Talk to students that aren't my students and see how they feel about school. Another big thing you can ask a teacher is, does the teacher travel frequently to perform? This is a fair question. If you are working with a teacher that is still actively performing, when they leave to go perform, are you assigned a TA? Do you have a grad assistant teaching you? Or is your teacher responsible for teaching you all of those lessons? Take a good hard look at that, because some schools, teachers are actively performing and they get taught by the GA when they're gone. Personally, for me, if I have a gig, I'll usually do my lessons before I leave for the gig. I'll preemptively make up lessons and then I'll do more lessons when I leave. But now with the advent of Zoom, I can see myself doing more remote lessons while I'm gone on a gig. If that's the student's choice. If they opt to wait for me live, that's fine. I'm happy to wait. No problem. So having these conversations with prospective teachers is really important. Also ask them how many students they currently teach. How many new students are they planning to take next year? In other words, how many spots do you have open in your studio? That's a reasonable question to ask. We sometimes don't know, to be honest. I won't know until May 3rd officially what next year looks like. I know how many students I'm losing this year, but that doesn't necessarily mean all those spots are open if I have multiple requests in my studio. Usually schools have teacher preference forms or some kind of indication that you want to tell someone like a Megan who you'd like to study with. Then someone like a Megan comes back and tells the voice faculty, They want to work with you. This one wants to work with you. But really what happens at the end of the year is most faculties get together and we look at students' requests, and we always try to honor the first choice of teacher. And then we go down the list if that studio becomes full. So asking teachers questions is really important. Teachers might ask you questions. That's also important. Don't be afraid to ask these questions. Just because the teacher is the authority in the room, that's not a reason to be intimidated. You're looking for a relationship with someone for 4 years. And if your parents are in the room, they should be asking questions as well. So again, I'll take a little pause and I'll ask anybody if they have any questions regarding this teacher-student relationship. Because then I'll end my lecture with a little follow-up on after your audition. And then we can have like a more frank discussion Q&A. So does anybody have any questions about how to approach a teacher, what you might write them in an email, etc.? If not, I'll just go on.
I'm going to drop a great resource in the chat that I recommend.
Yes,
say
please do.
what you would write to a teacher reminded me. There's a fantastic book called College Prep for Musicians. The
Yes.
Dean of Admissions at Juilliard is one of the co-authors of the book, along with a couple other professionals. And it only came out a couple of years ago. It's really affordable on Prime. I'm going to drop the website, or not Prime if you're anti-Amazon, which I respect, but it's easy to get there. I'm going to drop the link for their website there. They also have released a modulated online course to help you prepare as well. So especially those of you who are juniors, or honestly sophomores or younger, you can start this process really at any time. And I encourage, younger is better if you are on the younger end of the spectrum, because applying to college for music is so much more involved and complicated than applying to not to just be like a biology major, but I think you all understand what I mean. Like, you have the audition process on top of all the applications, and that's a whole nother set of things to navigate that Professor Aylmer has been talking about. But this book is a really great resource. It has email templates. That was why I brought it up at this point, for what to do to send for lesson requests, thank yous, all sorts of other things, in addition to walking you through timelines and things to explore. So I'll drop that in the chat.
Oh, Isaac says, is there any way to work with multiple teachers at once, or is it one-on-one? Most schools you go to, your private studio is a one-on-one experience, which doesn't mean you don't get to work with other teachers in other classes. For example, Maria Spacagna, who is my colleague and has her own voice studio, happens to teach Italian diction. So all first years go and take Italian diction with Maria Spacagna, and there's some singing in that class, but she's not your primary teacher. I teach vocal pedagogy to grad students, and occasionally, if there's room in my class, I take a couple of seniors in there too. So even if I haven't seen a student for most of their undergraduate education, if they want to take vocal pedagogy, I end up teaching them in my class, which is great because then I get to know them. The issue with private lessons and working with multiple teachers, there are several reasons why that's not a good idea. Number one, you don't want too many cooks in your kitchen. You may get conflicting technical advice from multiple teachers, and that may happen to you in the process of working with teachers in these sample lessons. You may sing a song for one teacher and they say this, 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 and then the teacher says this, 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 and then what do? It's difficult being in that position as a young singer, because you want to do what the teacher is telling you to do, but you also are in the process of training your skills to filter out the things you don't want to do. So if you work with multiple teachers at the same time, you end up spending more time filtering than you do actually learning one healthy technique that will sustain you. But as I said, at our school, our department is small enough that I know all of the students in our school. I know all their names, and I know all their studios that they're in, and I see their progress, and it's great. So I feel like everybody in our school is sort of shared, but I don't work with students outside of my studio. Yeah, unless it's in the summertime, and then that's fair game. If a student goes to the Savannah Voice Experience, for example, Maria Spacagna teaches there, and I've had some students go there in the summer and they work with her, and then they come back and they study with me, and that's fine. We don't own you in the summer. You can do the things that you like. How do you contact a professor for a lesson? Can they do a lesson by Zoom? Yes, actually, that's the one good thing that's happened to me this year. I have so much more flexibility with scheduling lessons because of Zoom. And I've been working with a lot of people on the West Coast because they can't necessarily get to the East Coast for lessons, either at CMU or in New York City, where I happen to be right now. So Zoom has been great for that. Um, Shoot us an email. That's the best way to find us. If you go to the website of the schools that you're applying to and you see the faculty and you read their bio and you think like, that seems like it might be a good fit, that person's bio, their contact information will be right there on that School of Music page. So it is not unusual to email a teacher cold. You don't have to have an in with that teacher. You just say, hey, I'm interested in applying to Carnegie Mellon for voice. I read your bio and I really would love to take a lesson with you if possible. Are you free? Blah, blah, blah. Or sometimes that question is let out of the email and then I have to respond and say, yes, I do teach prospective students. What's your availability? So, sometimes putting some things in that first email can save a little bit of the back and forth. If you're in school and you're available after 3:30 Mondays and Tuesdays, that I can work with. I can work with that. Personally, I try not to teach on weekends for obvious reasons. But if I'm in a pinch and I have to do a Saturday morning or something, okay, I'll do a Saturday morning. But yes, we do lessons by Zoom all the time now and FaceTime. And just shoot us an email and we'll get right back to you. Thanks for that, Heidi.
And
Is
I
there another?
noted too, if you don't hear back after a couple emails, just email the music admissions team because it might have just gone to spam or something wild like that. We've seen all sorts of strange things happen. So we can always assist in that process as well. And then Jamie has a question. Should I send a sample video or recording when asking for a lesson?
That's not a bad idea. You sure can, but it's not required. Um, for me, if I don't know you and it's cold and you're really happy you made this recording and it came out really well, just go ahead and send it. Yeah, I'll watch it. Sure. If it's especially something that you're looking to work on and you say, hey, I just did this for this concert or I'm preparing for my state's auditions, you know, maybe we could work on it in the lesson. That would give us something to do in a half hour or 40 minutes, whatever the lesson time is. Yeah, sending a video recording is always great if you have one. But again, if you don't have one, that's fine. If I have time in my schedule, and I don't know you, but you want to give me a little background about yourself, that would be great. I've made state choir the last 2 years in a row, or I'm new to singing, but my high school teacher just cast me in Sweeney Todd this year. A little bit of biographical information is really helpful if you don't have an audio or a video clip, just so I can get to know you before I meet you on Zoom or in person. Yeah. I'll just skip very quickly to what happens after your audition, and Megan can help with this process too. After your audition, it is never a bad idea to write a thank you letter. In fact, I would encourage it. You can either write an open one to all the faculty you sang for. That's why you should ask who's in the room, who's in there. But especially if you've taken a lesson with a teacher on campus, writing a thank you letter goes a really long way. I know this is the age of electronic emails and no phone calls, texts, so forth, but a thank you email is really sweet. And I can tell you from experience, I've really appreciated a thank you, especially because we don't charge for those sample lessons. Um, so that can also begin a nice correspondence with that teacher. Um, if you send a thank you, then I can write back and say, listen, it was a pleasure working with you. Let me know if I can answer any questions for you as the process goes on. I usually CC Megan on all of my student correspondences, just so she has a record of where you stand in the application process. So I don't have to call Megan all the time, be like, oh, I just talked to her, click. I just talked to her, click. I just CC her on everything, and that helps the student as well. So I just wanted to say, after the audition, this is the last thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to answer this question here. If you go to school to be a voice major, I'm going to go ahead and assume that you can sing. What sets you apart from your peers is not your ability to sing, but who you are as a musician and an artist. So I would challenge all of you to strive to find out, what is the beginning of that artist? What does that look like for you? When you're selecting repertoire, and I'm really talking about repertoire here, you've got to sing things that speak to you. You've got to connect with this repertoire in a way that is different from everybody else. There's a song of Schubert's called Nakht Untoyma. Maybe you've heard it. I love listening to that song. I do not like singing it, and I have never sung it in public. I don't like it. I don't like singing it. There's something about it. I love listening to it. It just gives me great agitation to sing it. So I don't sing it, even though I can. This is what I mean about finding repertoire that speaks to you. If there's something special that you want to show off, if your first language is Polish, for example, you grew up in a Polish speaking household and you want to sing a Polish folk song for your audition, do it. If you speak Spanish, why wouldn't you put a Spanish song on your audition? Plenty of great songs by Granados, Toradina. I mean, Todra. So many Spanish composers that wrote beautiful classical music. Why not sing it? Put yourself into the audition, not just your voice, because again, I'm going to assume that you can sing. What I really want to see is who you are. And I know it sounds cheesy, but that's absolutely true. So I'll just end with that. And now we will talk about specific questions. Closing my notebook. What are the questions? Here we go.
I'm answering a spree in the chat, but there's one in there that I'd love to have you answer. If
Okay.
you're still a year or two out from auditioning, can you ask professors for lessons?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I think, and Megan can help clarify this too. I have had students for several months or even a few years that decide to apply to CMU specifically to continue our relationship. So there have been people that I worked with, since they were sophomores in high school who then auditioned for my program. So it's not unusual at all for myself to try to recruit my own student, that does happen. In those cases, those aren't sample lessons. That's just being in a relationship with a teacher. But of course, if you want to check in with somebody and have a lesson with someone just to get a feel for what it is they do, and you're quite young, I might speak a little bit to that. I might say, okay, well, as a sophomore, you may not want to sing this song quite yet, but this would be good for you. Like, I love talking rep with young students, figuring out the basics of what it is they need, because as you know, so much growth happens in your teenage years. I mean, your larynxes go through a big growth spurt, both for men and women. So I don't mind working with younger students, not at all. And then I get to keep my eye on you and see what you're doing in the years to come. So yeah. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks. That was a great question. I just want to pop in because I got a handful of questions about the application process, just to explain in more than chat what it is that we do at CMU.
Please.
So we do, and you'll find this out a lot if you're applying to schools like CMU to have the academic experience like you would be seeking at CMU, a conservatory style experience within a larger institution, which I will note, what really sets us apart too is that we are physically located as part of main campus, which isn't always the case at other music programs at our caliber. But you'll probably find this at most schools where you're going to be required to do both the common application for the university, for the central office of admission, and then a music application. And that's where you'll want to keep all of your music specific materials, music teacher recommendations, music resume, of course, repertoire list, any recordings, anything like that. At CMU, the way it works is we go through our pre-screening and audition process. When we're in audition season, that's when the Office of Admission is doing the academic reviews. They're looking at your writing samples, GPA, test scores, if you have them. We are test optional this past year and again for next year. And TBD beyond that for the folks who are younger than next year's rising seniors in the room. Cross your fingers it stays test optional. It's been mostly
Yeah.
positive, but they do take into account things like academic opportunities and access at your high school, or if you've transferred between high schools to access different opportunities, the curriculum at your high school. Your school provides a school report, so they have all of this information available to them. What the rigor quality, like the amount of rigor that you can take at your school, and then they also recalculate your GPA internally. Just and some schools do this, some schools don't, but they do remove your freshman year grades and then recalculate your GPA if they need to like balance something out academically. I'm not quite sure how they do it, so don't ask me. I don't know for sure, but I do know that they at least take out their freshman year and then do kind of a recalculation from that point onward. I will note that, yes, we all know CMU is a very rigorous institution. It is known obviously for both the arts and technology, engineering, all these like high level programs where you have to, train a unicorn and walk on water, and that's how you get into CMU. It can feel that way. It can feel that way in general applying to college, that everybody has to overachieve to stand out. But at CMU, our process is about 80% determined by the audition component and by the School of Music. The academic side of it is just making sure that you'll be able to be successful at CMU. So know that if it's an academic component that may not find you admissible, we're trying to look out for your best interest. It's not a judgment on who you are or what you've done or how you are as an academic, but we're trying to make sure that if you come to CMU, you're going to be able to stay at CMU and graduate from CMU. So please keep that in mind. The beauty of removing test scores is that has historically been a barrier for students in music and drama as well. It can be quite a hiccup for us. So just cross your fingers that stays. But as far as kind of averages, because I know people like to hear numbers to feel a little more reassured, usually we're seeing GPAs within like the 3.5 to 3.75 and up range, but I have seen GPAs in like the 3.2 to 3.4 range that are completely admissible. It just depends on how the grades kind of shake out and what the spectrum looks like. And then test score wise, usually if it's an 1100 or above on the SAT, you're in pretty good range, as long as it's a balanced score. So if you have like an 800 and a 300, that's gonna raise some questions. Maybe take it again. But if you have like, a 500 and a, I don't know, 650, like that's fine. That's not, we're not expecting you to be a computer science major where everybody has a 1600, or at least it feels that way. That's not actually even true, but it does feel that way. So know that the university recognizes you're going to be a music major and you're not going to be taking a math class. You're not required to take a computer science. Like, you're not required to do all these things. We don't have a core curriculum that you have to do. We know that you're going to be a music student and your focus is on music. And we just want to make sure that you'll be able to handle the rigor of the music coursework. And that is what we're looking out for. So it's my little quick stump speech about applying.
Nice, Megan. Good job, Megan. Just two questions here. I see Nick, he's an undergrad looking at grad programs. Yes, it's appropriate to start looking at grad schools now. And I would recommend that you talk to your primary teacher now before you take lessons with other people. Because teachers even can get a little prickly, just, it's like, we want you to have a good time while you're in the undergrad years. We want you to have a good time with us. And it's like, oh, you want to leave me? No, it's not so bad like that. But if I had a student that I wanted to apply to, let's say for grad school to like Eastman, because I have some friends up there, I might say, hey, friend up at Eastman, I have a junior. Can I send him to you to work on this piece? Like, can you hear him or her? And usually they'll say yes. So it's not a bad idea just to dip your foot in that pool, but to take lessons consecutively, like week to week at the same time, that's a little prickly. So again, it's like having too many cooks in your kitchen. Talk to your primary teacher, see what they have to say, and go with their recommendations on that. Trust your teacher. I would. There was the double major thing. Yes, it's totally easy to double major at CMU. Totally.
Just not engineering. That's the only one. Don't try to do that. That's very complicated.
Yeah, I had a double major in English, and it ended up being a 5-year program for her because the academics with the English department and the curriculums, they didn't line up within a 4-year span. So she stayed for 5 years. So some of those double majors are 5 years. Some are 4 semesters plus, 4 years plus 1 semester, like the music education double degree. But Megan, maybe you can put in the chat about this. There it is, BXA program.
Need
If
to
you
do
look,
it.
there's a great BXA program that we won't have time to like really flesh out right now before 9 o'clock, but it does essentially give you the opportunity to focus on your voice majorness the first 2 years you're at CMU, and then the other discipline for the second 2 years at CMU.
Mhm.
So it's worth looking into if you do have an interest like math or biology, something that's very core intensive. The BXA might be for you. But I will say this, if you're a BXA person, you still have to be good enough to be a voice major too. So
Everyone
you
is
have to be able to get into the voice major program in order to be the biology BXA student.
Yes.
So I just wanted to put that out there. But yes, I love the fact that my students are so smart and they're doing English, creative writing. There's some of them are librettists now. They're minoring in German, they're minoring in Italian, they're going abroad in the summer. We had a student last year take a semester at sea. I didn't even know we did that, but we do apparently. She went on a boat on a ship and she just took off to like Prague and Greece for a semester. And she came back a different person, more well-rounded person. It was really great to see. So yes, can you be undecided when entering the school and then later audition for theater or voice? Yes, you can.
And I didn't put it in the chat, but I have another note to add on that is that at CMU, you can be involved in the School of Music, even if you aren't a major. We have a program called our Extension program, and you can take private lessons, kind of like you would now, where you would pay additional because it wouldn't be part of your tuition like a music major would, but you can pay to take lessons in really any area. We see plenty of students do that. And we've definitely seen students who come in under another major, they're taking lessons through Extension, they might have even auditioned for and be participating in one of our ensembles, and then say, actually, I do want to either add music as a major, maybe I'm applying through BXA, or maybe I just want to switch majors entirely into music. And we facilitate that audition and application process. Same as we would basically for a first year student. So that is definitely an option that's available. And vice versa, if you started as a music major, you find that you're absolutely in love with the German language and you just still want to continue taking lessons, but like that's the only thing you want to do, you would be able to transfer into another major and then still continue that through the extension program. So we try to be accessible to non-majors in productive ways.
I will say the extension division, the teachers are separate from the major studios, although occasionally a major voice teacher will teach someone who's a non-major. Like for myself, my studio was a little bit smaller this year because I had 2 students defer because of COVID. And I did take a school of drama major into my studio this year. And depending on my numbers, I would like to work with her again next year. And she's not a major, but that would be up to the individual studio teacher if they have room in their studio, if they have time to work with those students. But people matriculate from our program to others all the time. But as Megan was saying, there are some programs at CMU that you do have to audition to get into. You do have to reapply to get into those programs. School of Drama is one of them, and engineering would definitely be another one. Architecture, I think, too. You have to have.
Business is tricky. Surprisingly, you would think that would go together more, but the way they do their programming is challenging to work with another major. So there's
I would advise look into it and find out what the rigors of each of those programs are, what the requirements are before you get to school and find out you can't matriculate. So.
And we try to work with families this time of year once you know you're admitted to help navigate those decisions as well, and kind of what the risk factor is of coming if you want to do the other thing and maybe you weren't admitted or you've decided later or whatever it may be. And like you said, Professor Aylmer, there's sometimes extra summers, maybe an extra semester to fit it all in, but we do try to get students in and out in 4 years as much as we possibly can, because you've got to move on and do other exciting things.
I think a lot of the students here may have to move on to another class too. I mean, this was only supposed to go to 9. It is 9 o'clock now. Mary, I know Mary is listening. Her video is not on, but if anybody has other questions, I'm happy to answer a couple more. But if people have to go, I totally understand that too. So thanks for joining me tonight, you guys. I know it's a long week, a long semester. It was a pleasure talking to all of you.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you
Good
so
night.
much.
Yes, thank you so much, Jennifer and Megan. And you guys have a good night. We're down to our last class of the day. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Feel free to email me if you need to.
you.